Hi, friends, and welcome back to the Leading for Children podcast. I'm Julia Connolly, your host today and Communications and Program Leader at LFC. The truth is, things are hard right now. I'm feeling it, the people I care about are feeling it, folks across communities are feeling it. The hard doesn't look the same for everyone, and it doesn't feel the same for everyone, but no matter its shape and size, it's almost impossible to avoid, and it carries a ripple effect. Each time we turn on the TV or open social media, we're bombarded with information, things that stir up emotions, cause uncertainty, and that we don't always know how to hold. This matters for us and our well-being, and it matters for our children, because they are paying attention and they are expert absorbers of all of our stuff. So in today's episode, we're going to explore that reality, that challenging and complex emotions are a non-negotiable part of life. We're going to talk about what it looks like to honor our experiences, seek camaraderie in the hard moments, step into our sense of leadership, and find resilience inside of ourselves and within one another's support. And I'm really happy to be inviting someone into this conversation who consistently finds ways to show up across many community roles, modeling humanity, persistence, and leadership in a really admirable way. Allison, welcome. Please introduce yourself for our listeners and share a little bit about who you are.
Hi, I'm Allison Klingmann. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a mom of one, happily married. Been with my husband now for 27 years. I'm an educator and an artist and a homeschool guru and a homeschool teacher for my daughter. I do homeschool evaluations and I play roller derby and have a couple other community commitments, but I'm also an advocate for autism.
Thank you so much, Allison. Every part of your life carries such an interesting perspective, and I'm really grateful that you're here to share and that we, the listeners, will have this opportunity to learn from you. You know, at LFC, we talk about the ecosystem of adults surrounding children and the idea that if you are in the life of a child, no matter what role, you are a part of that ecosystem and you matter. And it's really awesome that you are in so many different roles in children's ecosystems. And so you carry all these different inside scoops. And that's true for many of us. We all play many roles across different children's ecosystems. And yet when we introduce ourselves, when we think about our identity, often we look toward professional titles, professional roles, and some of those more human relationship oriented titles are left aside. And so it's always great to start the conversation with, who are you in the grand scheme of your life? So, today we're talking about the hard stuff, to put it very simply, and kind of the fact that our culture, our world, society isn't necessarily shaped in a way that supports us through the hard stuff. It doesn't really have a rubric for how to slow down and experience and process it as individuals, as a collective. And so what often happens is it gets stuck. That stuff gets stuck inside of our bodies and it impacts our relationships. And sometimes we don't know it's there until all of a sudden we have a relationship tension that we can't understand and don't know how to work through. And sometimes we don't notice it until we're parents and we are seeing it in our children reflected in their behavior or the way that we're speaking to them. And it's also as simple as the times where we're having a little interaction and someone says, "How are you today?" And you kind of just say, "Oh, I'm fine." And that might not be your truth. And it feels easier to say that, but it's not your truth. And so I'm curious to start this conversation by looking a little bit into your past and how you were brought up and the kinds of influences that you had that shaped your relationship with holding the hard stuff and kind of how you interact with it inside of yourself and communicate about it with others.
Well, my upbringing glossed over feelings, basically. You didn't really talk too much about feelings. So that was something I really learned as I've grown and matured. And I would say so much more as I've become a mom. But, as an educator, especially working with smaller children, like you start peeling back the layers of, okay, why do we feel this way? And it's easy to say, okay, well, I'm mad and this is the reason why, and then just go and not really examine the behavior or the trigger behind that. And I think because as a society, we are very fast paced and knee jerk reactions, and then we just move on. And like you were saying about the ripple effect, it's so important for us to take stock in ourselves and why we react in certain ways and really examine it to go back and say, what can I learn from that situation? Because it is a ripple effect. And we're the only ones that can control our own behaviors and reactions to things. And it's vitally important that we take the time to do that so that we can better ourselves and then our actions affect others. And so we want to make sure we're trying to do the best to help others and model that examination. I taught preschool BSE special education for about 6 years before I got pregnant with my daughter. And so that was a really good background to give me a good idea of starting to examine behaviors, and especially because the kids were special education. We had an ABA therapist that worked in my classroom. And so learned a lot about figuring out what happened before, what caused the behavior, how can we then re-examine to figure out what we need to change. And that framework of ABA of looking at the causes, the behavior, and then how to reframe it really gave me a good structure of then like internally looking at myself. And
Mm,
it's like, okay, I got upset with my daughter. I yelled at her. And then I go back and I look at that. Why did I yell at my daughter? Okay, I was mad. Why was I mad? Because she didn't listen to me. So some people would just leave it at that, move on and say, well, it was her fault because she made me mad. But then I look at that further and it's like, well, I'm feeling frustrated because I didn't feel in control. And as the adult in the situation, per my prior experiences, I feel like I should be the one in control. So really the frustration's internal toward myself because I have this sense of I need control. And so then you start peeling back all these layers and you're like, wow, it was really me. I was the problem. And then my behavior affected her behavior. And once you start realizing those cycles and like how to reframe the way that you think about emotions and behaviors, it's really eye opening and it really helps a lot with self discovery. And if you can take the time to like really examine and peel back and try and figure out that root cause, that's when you have the opportunity to say, okay, well, these are all the things. How can I change that for myself? How can I recognize that next time so that I can be like, I need to stop. I'm the one that's having the emotional outburst, not my child. And then I'll go back and I'll sit down with my kid if it's a situation that warrants that. And we'll talk about it. I'll be like, look, I yelled at you. I shouldn't have done that. Then I explain the process. And now I have an 11-year-old that's very articulate of her emotions and feelings. And when she's upset, she can tell you exactly why. And I'm just like, wow, how different would my life have been if I could have done that at that age? I don't know. It's fascinating. And, it tells you a lot about yourself and who you want to be and you can always change that.
yeah, I heard a lot of super important things in all that you just said, and the word agency is coming up for me. We talk a lot about agency at LFC and, how we get to decide who we want to be in the world, how we want to be in the world. And leadership isn't about a title or positional power or authority. It's about the way that we choose to show up and impact the people around us. And yeah, that is such an important decision to go deeper, even when it hurts a little bit, because it's just true that whether we say it aloud or not, there is more stuff there. And it's whispering little lessons to us, shaping our sense of trust and safety in the world. And children, my goodness, such absorbers. No matter what you say to them, they're listening and watching. And if you're yelling and they don't understand why, what it's going to do is teach them not to feel safe, not to feel trusting in the relationship. And so I think it's so beautiful the way you've described going back to your daughter and saying to her, like, hey, I did this and it wasn't right and I'm sorry and this is why. Because then you also gave her this really beautiful opportunity to have space for your humanity. And now she's learning to have empathy for you and to value the behaviors of going back to reflect and repair. And so there's so much in there that's important. And it's such a nuanced process. And how great would it be if we all were willing to put that effort in and do the extra work?
Yeah, what you said about giving them the capacity for the humanity. You're so right in that because we have experienced that where I would make a mistake and later I'd go back and I'd apologize to the doctor and she's like, "But mama, you're just human. You're just growing and learning too." And I'm just like, "Oh, you're right." But
Yeah.
it really allows you to give yourself more grace because a lot of us internalize things. We're so forgiving of other people, but then we internalize for us and we hold ourselves to a standard that's unrealistic. And then we spiral over things we've done and have a lot of self hate and stuff. And I think really going back through and examining those things gives you the ability to have a humility and a grace for yourself that you might not have otherwise.
Yeah, because if we're teaching our kids that when we mess up, that's a really bad thing that we don't want to say out loud, or, if we're not willing to say it for them, then they're also learning, oh, when I mess up, that's wrong. And I have to keep it in and feel bad about it. And I think that's such an important pattern break that probably is becoming with new generations more accessible. I heard a story recently about a mom who lost her child's stuffed animal in public, like left it somewhere, and she was really nervous to tell her kid and wanted to make up a lie or an excuse or something, or just not tell her. And eventually she was like, "Nope, you know what? I'm just gonna be authentic and say, I am so sorry. I messed up." And I think it was a 3 or 4 year old. And she said, "Mama, it's okay." Like she saw her face and read her heart through her face
Wow.
and met her there. And I think that was such a beautiful testament to what we're capable of when we give ourselves and each other the opportunity to be vulnerable and
Mhm.
express emotions and empathy. And that deepens the trust and the safety. And yeah, I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, that is.
I'm curious, obviously for a multitude of reasons, things are heavy in our world right now. And I've noticed people are feeling it and you can kind of read it in their body language. And yet we aren't really sure how to go about saying it out loud. It's also tricky because it's political and,
Yes.
people don't want to be stepping on each other's toes. Or I used to always hear, we don't talk about politics, we just leave that off the table. But, life is political. Like being a
Yeah.
human in a society is political. And so it's really kind of impossible to leave it off the table because it's our values and it's the way that we show up together. And so I'm curious if you're noticing a shift in your communities, the ways that people are feeling and showing up with each other, that you're having to maybe shift to meet them, or I'll leave it kind of open.
Thankfully, most of the communities that I am involved with are very open and very progressive and very human rights forward. Roller derby, that one has always been a group that's been proactive for inclusion and making sure that people are not marginalized. Of course, discussion is open. So a lot of people talk about what's going on and how it's affecting them. And then you see a lot of people stepping up and saying, let's start this group that we share where safe spaces are and where safe places to travel. Because with roller derby, we do a lot of interstate travel and cross state travel. And so we're always open about where are safe places to be. So that community is just proactive and open. It's a relief. It's a relief to have a space that you feel completely safe to say how you feel. And then, of course, the art community is very forward thinking and progressive and open as well, due to the state, because I live in Florida. Things are still pretty supportive from the art world. We're just having to go about things a little bit differently. We're still doing the same things we always do. And I think that's an important thing to remember is that people will find a way to make sure that the right things are happening. It might just be labeled differently. So that gives me a lot of hope. And then from the autism community, gosh, there's been so many things that have been said that are so incredibly hurtful to a population that already faces so many challenges. And I've seen so many people that I know, parents of autistic children and autistic adults, that have stood up and said, "Hey, this is not right." And yeah, it's just so sad to see them have to even say that because they already face so much. But it's good to see people standing up and still speaking their truth, even though things are in a complicated state. And I really appreciate people that are brave enough to take a stand in whatever capacity that they can. To me, that's true leadership. And I've seen a
Mhm.
lot of that, and I'm happy to be a part of that. I do homeschool evaluations. So that's like the person for the state of Florida. You have to have a certified teacher take a look at your child's work through the year just to make sure that they're making progress. And there's different little caveats that you got to sort of checklist off. And I do that. I've been very open through my platform on what I support. And I know that that probably loses some business for me, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay
Mhm.
with taking that stand. I think that's something important for all of us to try and do if we can in our own capacity.
Mhm. Yeah. I've heard a lot of people saying that the best thing you can do when you feel stuck and hopeless and tired is do something anyways and find the communities that you have shared values and you're working towards something
Mhm.
together. And it's like there's this tension around we shouldn't have to, we shouldn't have to, like you're saying, the parents of children with autism who shouldn't have to. They're already working so hard to advocate on top of that, but it's one of the most, I think, beautiful things about humans and society is like when people do come forward and stand together and decide belonging matters to us and we're going to make it happen no matter what.
Yeah.
Have you noticed a shift in the way that children are showing up?
So the kids that I work with, I do a art class at a museum and it's for kids on the spectrum. I haven't really seen too much there, and that's a very limited scope. I see more in the homeschool community than honestly I thought I would see, especially anything that involves history, kids standing up and just saying, well, this is happening right now, and that's not right. Like they'll compare to historical stuff that they've seen or learning about, and they're like, well, that's what's happening right now, and that's not right. And then, of course, what I've seen of actual students standing up and doing the protest, and then I've attended a lot of protests, and I see kids out there holding signs, and I see teenagers that are there all by themselves, not with a parent, because they think it's important to stand up, and it's so inspiring and so brave. And I was asking Robin, my daughter, how she felt politically because that's a hard balance too, like having a child and figuring out how to filter what's happening going on, but also not leaving them in the dark on what's going on. So she gets a magazine each week. It's called The Week Junior. It's a great publication for kids, and it's very straightforward. It is not too right or too left. It's just very factual. And that one is a wonderful way to get out information to kids. But I asked her, I was like, how do you feel about what's going on with politics? Because she will hear some stuff on NPR every once in a while. And she told me, she's like, I'm worried, I'm scared, and I'm angry. And we've talked about that. And I'm like, right now as 11-year-old, what can you do? And she's like, I don't know. And so I've showed her how to like email representatives and senators. And that's a proactive way if she decides, and I'm not pushing this, this is up to her. I'm like, this is a way you could make your voice heard because you are their future constituents. But I'm like, the best thing you can do right now as 11-year-old is learn all that you can about history and read books where people face adversity and how they overcome those adversity.
Finding that balance of how much is okay to say and not wanting to push agendas and create space for your kids' opinions, but also their emotions. I think maybe allowing their emotions to inform their opinions, right? Like, I appreciate that you started with how do you feel about it and that kind of led to action and led to opinions. And I'm wondering if you have any observations or tips or anything as to how to support parents, teachers, anyone who is interacting with children with how to find that balance and kind of respect their voice and their wisdom and their emotions and support them and also not carrying the burden by themselves because again, they're holding it whether we want them to or don't.
That's exactly right. Ooh, that's a tough one because as an educator, that can put you in a sticky spot. But what I have seen from fellow educators is that you stick to your truth. And that sort of goes back to the emotion thing and figuring out what the root of something is. So politically, whether you're left leaning, right leaning, what is your base morality, your base thoughts? Because we can take all this stuff in the world and it can be boiled down into very simple things. I think as an educator, for sure, making sure that you're coming from that place of the base thought of stuff. So, what are you okay with morality wise? And I think if you come from a place of this is right and this is wrong, or this is personally how I feel, without interjecting the layers of political rhetoric that's going on, I think you can still reach students and other people. If you boil it down to the basic facts of do we want to treat people equally? I think if you come at it from that standpoint, then you can still share your thoughts with students. And then there is nothing wrong with teaching students about their rights to contact representatives, no matter how they feel, and you can present it that way. Maybe they feel opposite of you. That's okay. We need opposing voices, whether we like them or not, to help us think about why we feel the way we do about certain things. I think if you can just come from it from a very straightforward manner, then you can provide solid advice and solid tips on how to navigate. And I love books, so I'm always going to reference back. Find a book that resonates with you of where somebody faces something and against all odds, they persevere because that's what we need. You need the little hobbit to go off whether he doesn't want to or not and not get his second breakfasts and go travel away from his little hobbit hole and make the journey even though he doesn't want to and even though he doesn't think he has the ability to take on these people that are literally bigger than him, and yet through community they do it. And also just letting people know that it's not that you have to be some special hero. It's always the common everyday person that some spark ignites and they just don't give up. They don't sit down. They keep standing up no matter what. And I think that's what we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, doing hard things through community.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. The point about sticking to your truth really resonates with me. We explored as a monthly topic at Leading for Children the idea of living in alignment with your values. And that kind of came from me feeling like exactly what you're saying. If you remove all this topical stuff, all the little debacles, the opinions and arguments, if you put that all aside and ask, what is it really about? It's how do you think people deserve to be treated? You know, the very most basic values. Like, I want everyone to be well. I want you to be well. Really, that's all it is. And I think so much of the tension that we feel inside of ourselves comes from living outside of our values, living in misalignment with our integrity. And those things like anxiety and guilt, all the yuck that depletes us and feels really overwhelming and consuming and that confuses us. You know, we don't know how to move forward because we're so caught up in strategizing and trying to make sense of and place. And if we strip that all away and get back to I want you to be well. What is my truth? I think that it would save us a whole lot of energy. And then things like vulnerability could come through and shine as a strength and support us in deepening our connections with ourselves and with each other.
I agree with that totally, and like what you're saying about the getting back to your values, sticking to your truths. I also feel like being sure that you're holding space for yourself because things are so overwhelming emotionally right now, and there's just a lot. I think there's a real power right now in cutting off any energy vampires or any energy drain, sticking up for yourself, saying no to things that are not serving those values. And I feel like in some situations and in some times in your life, you can be more open to those things and you can extend yourself a little bit more. But personally, for me right now, there's a lot of no's going on because I feel like I have to be very conscious of my mental, emotional state so that I can make sure that I stick true to those values and truths and have the energy to give it back to my child and my husband and other communities that I'm involved with. Because otherwise, if you get too extended, you're just drained and then things start unraveling.
Yeah. What we're talking about, I think, is that word resilience. Like, that's going to be the thing that keeps us going. And it's not easy to build and it wavers. But I think when you're grounded in your truth and what matters to you, that's the root.
I really think resilience from a community standpoint, like life is a marathon, and sometimes you have to walk, sometimes you jog, and sometimes you really run. And I think when you're involved with a community, keeping that resilience spark is really dependent on your community. Like maybe right now I'm really leading and inspiring others, and then maybe I'm starting to get depleted. So maybe more like not really a sprint, but a relay race in your community. And I'm tired right now. So now somebody else is picking up the baton and they're going and they're sort of leading and inspiring. And then maybe something happens in their life and they have to put it down and somebody else picks it up. I think that is one of the most important things about resilience is realizing that it is not completely entirely dependent upon one person. That comes across a lot in roller derby, like you have a really good player out on the track, but that one player cannot defeat the opposing team by themselves. You have to have that teamwork, that community to work together to make your points or make your goal. And that's just so important to realize. I think that's where a lot of people get really scared by leadership is they think, okay, well, if I take on this role, it's all me. And I think one of the really important things about leadership is realizing, yes, you are taking a role that's very important. And yes, you are sort of the head of it, but you come to realize how important so many other people are to that leadership and how they support it and how that leader utilizes those other people. And that to me is resilience, is using your community and just realizing it isn't all on you.
Absolutely. And I also heard in that rest. When you decide it's time, I'm tired, I'm ready to pass the baton, honoring that you're tired and our bodies aren't meant to carry all of it all the time. And so just creating space and kindness toward yourself to recover when you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, like a lot of people, we're so scared of that because we are in a go, go, go society. But I think maybe we are finally coming collectively to more knowledge of how necessary rest is and not always just burning ourselves out. And it's been surprising to me in different leadership roles that I've had where I have had to step back and say, y'all, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. And people were so supportive. You think you're letting people down, but you're not. And they're stepping up and getting to have an opportunity. And you realize how important that is to, again, acknowledge something that's hard for others to do because then you give the example of, hey, she did a good job in that position, but life happened and she had to step down, and that's okay.
Yeah, and you talk about society moving at such a quick pace, and yet the people within it have more patience and kindness and grace. And I wonder if there's this impression that we all have to keep up and be productive all the time. But when it comes down to it, we're a lot nicer to each other, a lot kinder to each other about understanding it's more complicated than that. We've all been exhausted, and burnout is not uncommon right now at
Yeah.
all. Yeah. I'm hopeful that we're shifting in that direction and honoring our humanity a little bit more all the time.
I think because we're having conversations like this we know that it is, like the seeds planted. Like historically looking back, there are snippets, but like these type of conversations are so important because you don't hear that historically very much.
Yeah, we need to say it out loud more and have that validation from each other that it's okay. I know, like, on our team, sometimes Nicole, our executive director, will give us permission in a team meeting, like, it's okay to do what you need to do and this, that, or the other thing, and we don't always trust it by default, so it feels good and validating to just hear that we're seeing and respecting each other's humanity, and I agree, the more we have these conversations and tell each other it's okay to be human, the better.
I got your prompts, your questions, and I was thinking about everything. And for some reason, the Greek thing or the Socrates, what he said, know thyself. And it's such a simple concept, but such a hard thing to do. And I think that if we all made a little bit more space for self reflection and self examination and why we have these emotions and feelings, that the world would be a much better place for all of us because we could come from a much more humanitarian ideology of I'm a human, you're a human, we all make mistakes and we all have heavy feelings at times. And I guess that would be my parting thought. Give
Yeah.
yourself a little bit more grace and give yourself some time to think about things.
Thank you. And to circle it all back to children, it has such an impact on them because one, the things that we're maybe retroactively healing in ourselves, we're making it so they don't ever have to heal that. We're meeting them where they need to be met now, and then we're modeling for them. This is how we want to be in the world. This is the kind of world we want to live in. And we are giving them the tools and resources, the internal resources to set up that future.
Exactly, because sometimes you think of that self-reflection and self-time as a selfish thing, but it's not. It's just modeling because like you said, children are sponges and they take in everything you do. It's modeling for them that this is something important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Allison, so, so much for joining me today for this conversation. I am really appreciative of your perspective and thoughtfulness and the persistence that you have continuing to show up for your community and also helping prepare our children to hold and carry forward this mission of preserving and uplifting our humanity together. So, thank you, thank you, thank you. And to our listeners, a big thank you to you as well. Before you transition into the next part of your day, I'd like to offer an invitation. Let's take a moment to slow down and pause and breathe and notice what's going on in our bodies and our minds and our hearts. What are you carrying? What are you anticipating? What are you excited for? What's weighing you down? All of it matters. And you don't have to do anything with it or about it. Just notice it's there and that it's a part of your experience. It's not about dragging yourself down or even trying to be positive when you're not feeling positive. It's about noticing what's true and honoring that truth and giving yourself the opportunity for choice, for intention, to show up in a way that nourishes you. See if you can find moments to slow down like this throughout your day, every day. It doesn't have to be epic like my mom says. It just has to be something, an offering, a gift to yourself. Again, we're so grateful you're part of our community, and we invite you to follow along with our podcast. We release them every other month, so subscribe on your favorite listening platform. We also have blogs every other month, and you can find that on our website, leadingforchildren.org. You can also find on our website a link to subscribe to our newsletter, so that way you are in the loop every time there's new content or something's coming up. We have a national conversation 4 times a year where anybody and everybody can come join us for a mutual learning experience. And if you want to know more about that, I'll link below. I'm not sure when you're listening, but we have one coming up next week, April 16th, 2026, and I will link that in the description of this episode. So thank you again, and wishing you optimism. Till next time.